Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in. Folks, our guy, Dr. Gerald Horn, is back. He's going to give us a little bit more insight about for today's Horn Report as we talk about everything from President Biden's document dilemma to what's happening in Haiti. We've got a lot to cover. So I'm certainly looking forward to the conversation. Also, we're going to talk about the Transition Academy out of the Medgar College. This is an academy that's teaching homeless youth on how to get their lives back on track educationally. We're going to be checking in with them about the work that they're doing. And then later, I told y'all, man, it's coonery. That's right. I'm talking about Gerard Carmichael, who hosted the 80th Golden Globe Awards the other night. The Whitney Houston estate has put out a statement to basically say that they were disappointed in what the comic had to say about icon Whitney Houston. And guess what? I stand with it. Stay with us. All of that is happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. We got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into it. For the first conversation, folks, I'm so happy to have my big brother. He's a scholar. He's a professor, the Morris Professor of African-American Studies and History, the University of Texas in Houston, and we're always happy to have him on the show. Let's get ready for another installment of the Horn Report. We are joined by none other than Dr. Gerald Horn, who has been doing some work, took some time away from us, but we are so happy and so grateful for him to just check back in, as there has been a number of things happening. And Dr. Horn, you said it best off air. You said the world has changed dramatically since the last time we've talked, and you are absolutely right. All right, I got to pick your brain. Today is a much more extended edition of the Horn Report because there's just so much happening. And I think, Dr. Horn, you bring so much great insight and analysis to the conversation. So I didn't want to, feel like we were constrained with time. But first and foremost, dear brother, how are you, sir?
Hey, it's all good. What about you?
I'm good. I know that you've been doing some research. I know that you've been doing some writing. I know that you've been doing some lecturing. How are all those things coming along for you?
Oh, it's all good. I mean, I've been working on a book that I'll probably start writing by the end of the year, thankfully, hopefully.
Awesome. And can you give us a little tidbit as to what the book might be about this time, Doc? Because you've been putting out some books now.
So the focus will be on the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles, which went through a lot of turmoil. And it's going to deal with their attempts, at least of some of the members, to launch armed struggle. It'll deal with the support they receive from some Hollywood celebrities. It'll deal with their opportunities and efforts overseas, particularly in Algeria. So I haven't finished the research yet, but we'll see what happens.
Man, Doc, I'm in LA right now. I have relocated to LA. So that is going to be, man, you got my fire lit, because I'm wondering, okay, what type of research have you uncovered? But wow. That would be awesome. And of course, we will do all that we can do here on the culture and on the Black Star Network to support you in any way that we need to support you, brother. But that is going to be amazing. So we certainly look forward to that. All right, Doc, let me pick your brain. The first thing, what can we say? This speaker situation that we saw with Kevin McCarthy and Hakeem Jeffries. Both now have been certified as being their respective leaders of their parties in Congress. What do you make of how we saw the whole Kevin McCarthy situation? And then, Hakeem Jeffries put out, his first major speech was an alphabet of just laceration. But more importantly, it was for me, like a reminder of where we are in this country. And I'm wondering, from your vantage point, how does this all play out? As you study politics, you study history a lot. Of course, you see how things kind of ebbs and flows. But this place that we find ourselves in this country, can we really move forward? Will the country make the gains that it needs to make, at least over the next 2 years?
It's hard to say. I know that many people were laughing at the Republicans because of the 15 ballots that it took to elect Congressman Kevin McCarthy of Bakersfield, California, as Speaker. But this is no laughing matter. If January 6, 2021 was a blitzkrieg attempt at a coup d'etat to prevent the peaceful transfer of power from Mr. Trump to Mr. Biden, what we witnessed in the past few days in Washington is a slow motion coup d'etat. And I think we should realize that given the empowerment of these 20 or so odd Republicans led by Matt Gaetz of Florida and Laura Boebert of Colorado, there is the distinct possibility that they may try to bring the entire temple down. What I mean by that is they may attempt to force the United States government to renege on its debt obligations. As you know, the United States borrows money in order to pay for everything from the post office to the Pentagon. And oftentimes it borrows money from the People's Bank of China. The United States is about $1 trillion in debt to that particular entity, not to mention its counterpart in Japan. If the Republicans have their say in their way, those obligations will be reneged upon, and that would be an unparalleled crisis. It's difficult to say what might ensue, except that it would be enormous damage to the US economy and, in fact, to the entire capitalist economy. And so that is only one of particular crises that these Republican renegades and dead enders may be visiting upon us. Not to mention the fact that in order to escape this crisis, as they tried to do with Mr. Obama about a decade ago, they may try to compel President Biden to pull the plug on Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, which occupy a significant percentage of the federal budget. If the plug is pulled on Social Security, you're going to have a lot of seniors, 65 years and older, eating dog food for breakfast. So this is a very serious crisis, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out.
That is a very serious crisis. And I just want to first make a correction. Doc was representing the University of Houston, which is in Texas. So I do want to make sure that we said that. But you know, that as soon as you said that, Doc, the thing that comes to my mind is the fact that this may lay the groundwork for what some may believe might be one of the most contentious elections in American history coming up in 2024, because folks are already kind of bracing. I've actually heard some folks, not even election deniers, but just some folks in general that say, you know what, Biden might be the last president, certified president, right? And it's a very like apocalyptic gloomsday type of prophecy here. So, but now that you are mentioning these things, I'm thinking to myself like, wow, if you are an election denier, if you are Josh Hawley, if you are Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you're in that camp, this may set up the groundwork for that. Is that a good assessment of the situation?
Oh, absolutely. Recall that I began my remarks by talking about an attempted coup d'etat, a blitzkrieg of a coup d'etat attempt on January 6, 2021, where the January 6th report, which is now out, it came out in December. I recommend it, even though it's only 800 pages, even though it's more than 800 pages, I should say, because it presents a detailed analysis of the attempt to unleash a mob on Congress that might have potentially lynched Vice President Michael Pence. There was a gallows constructed on the grounds of Capitol Hill. Fortunately, that was thwarted. And now, as noted, we're seeing a slow motion coup d'etat. That is to say, with this attempt to possibly derail the installment of Speaker McCarthy, that could eventuate in a turn to office of Mr. Trump in November 2024. And of course, revenge will be on his mind. And I know that you want to talk about some of these recent threats to the current administration of Joseph R. Biden. And those too are very serious. The fact that these classified documents have been found in the garage of his estate in Wilmington, Delaware, and in an office he had in Philadelphia has led Attorney General Garland to appoint a special prosecutor to look into this. Of course, Mr. Garland probably felt that he had no alternative since he has an investigation going into Mr. Trump and his misuse and abuse of classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. But recall that when you unleash a special prosecutor, as Bill Clinton could tell you, and they begin poking around in your business, well, you saw what happened to Bill Clinton. They uncovered the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the fact that he was having an affair with an intern and then lying about it. And she had evidence, she had the receipts, figuratively speaking, on that particular affair that led to his being impeached and barely prevented his being ousted from office. And that's what's in store for Mr. Biden starting today. And we haven't even talked about Hunter Biden, his son. There's a major story in today's New York Times about all of the problems of Hunter Biden, the president's son. He used to be smoking crack. He had an affair with the widow of his deceased brother. He was on the take from oligarchs in Ukraine when Joseph R. Biden was the point man for President Obama on Ukraine. Mr. Hunter Biden received diamonds from a Chinese tycoon, and the Republicans are going to be investigating all of this. They say they can connect this directly to the man in the Oval Office. I'm not sure if they can, but obviously the road ahead is going to be quite rocky for one Joseph R. Biden.
Folks, we're just getting started. We are just getting started. Dr. Gerald Horne is joining us for today's the Horne Report. Look, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, Dr. Horne, I want us to continue to talk about that. And I know that it just came across the wire here that CNN just put it out there that McCarthy is still going to continue to back Mr. Santos, even though he lied about his situation.
Mr. Santos had the nerve to say he was part black, believe it or not. This is the Republican.
Maybe this is the same man that said he was Jewish-ish? Jewish?
He's blackish too.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, more with my big brother, Dr. Gerald Horne. Stay with us. There's a lot to talk about here on the culture on the Black Star Network. Wow.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, we are talking to Dr. Gerald Horne from the University of Houston. Dr. Horne has given us some insight into the situation relating to the Speaker of the House debacle, as well as a little bit about what we can expect with President Biden's document dilemma for today's Horne Report. Doc, I want to kind of dive a little deeper in this situation. So, of course, you're saying that the president looking at this document. So, well, let me go back. I want to go back to the Speaker of the House thing with George Santos, because I'm trying, Dr. Horne, I'm trying to wrap my mind around how does a man who lies, not even the quote unquote little white lies, the big lies, big bold lies, he still refuses to resign. And then you got people in his party, i.e. newly appointed House Speaker for the GOP, Kevin McCarthy, are still backing him in this whole situation. I mean, if I'm trying to understand, Dr. Horne, what the hell is going on? Like it does morality, does truth, do those things not exist? And I'm not saying just for the GOP, I'm just saying in general. I mean, it's insulting to say the least that you have a person who admits to lying, you have the receipts to show that he's lying, and he still is, I'm not resigning. This is my job. And the big party behind him is saying, guess what? He doesn't have to resign. So what does that say to us as the American people at this point? How are we supposed to handle that? How are we supposed to process that, sir?
Well, it certainly does not speak well for the voters in Long Island, in New York State, who voted him into office on the GOP ticket. He lied about being a graduate of Baruch College of the City of New York, a graduate of New York University, an employee of Goldman Sachs, the Wall Street firm. He lied about his mother dying as a direct result of 9/11. He lied about being a descendant of Holocaust survivors with roots in Ukraine. He lied about being partially Jewish, or Jewish, as he put it. He may have even lied about being gay because he was formerly married. That story has not unraveled yet. He probably lied about being part black, too. You know, his roots.
I didn't hear that part.
Right. Well, you know, the stories are still unfolding. But on a more serious level, this guy may do some serious jail time, because apparently he lied on his financial disclosure statements, on his statements concerning campaign contributions. The New York Times has a story on its website today that digs into the detail about that. So we understand why Kevin McCarthy, the incoming speaker, is standing by his man, because Mr. Santos voted 15 times for Mr. McCarthy to be speaker. And there's only a 4-vote Republican majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so we understand why Speaker McCarthy is standing by his man. But I'm afraid to say that the troubles for Mr. Santos are just beginning. He may wind up in an orange jumpsuit, quite frankly.
And that really won't deter people from supporting him or the Republican Party. I mean, I don't see that being a deterrent. Do you?
Well, it's unclear. The Long Island Republicans pulled the plug on him yesterday. I'm not sure what that means, because they helped to boost him into office. And what's really missing from the discourse on Mr. Santos is that he was an extreme right Republican nominee, not just the ordinary run-of-the-mill Republican. And that, once again, that does not speak well for the voters on Long Island, an affluent community that voted him into office and now is having buyer's remorse. But I'm afraid to say that this is just par for the course for the Republican caucus in the House. Being a liar is probably the least of their indiscretions, I'm afraid to say.
Damn. Now let's talk about these documents, because now we're seeing them. I want to play this clip from President Biden where he was really harassed about these documents, and a reporter had to kind of press him on this situation. Take a look at what the president said and how he said it.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President,
okay.
classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, we're going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But anyway, yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyer has reviewed other places where documents from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas and file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately, as was done, the Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document. So we're going to see all this unfold. I'm confident. Thank you very much.
They yelling and screaming at the president, Doc.
It's only the beginning, only the beginning. I mean, he was reading from a prepared statement, and yet he was stumbling nonetheless, which is not a good sign. And I need to reiterate that when you appoint a special prosecutor or a special counsel, they can dig into all of your business. Look at Ken Starr, the late Ken Starr, and how he, as I said, put Mr. Clinton in the bullseye. So understand why Mr. Biden was stumbling and fumbling while he was reading that prepared statement.
So it's right now, as far as we can see, we know Trump's document dilemma as well, right? I mean, he took documents and held them for over a year and put them in certain, different places at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Can this be put in the same? Is this like similar things, or this is apples and oranges?
I would say it's both. I mean, it's both in the sense that on the one hand, you have the misuse and abuse of classified documents. On the other hand, Mr. Biden disgorged the documents immediately, unlike Mr. Trump. Apparently, if you can accept Mr. Biden's statement, they were in a locked garage, he says.
Next to his Corvette, Dr. Horn. He had to make that known, sir. My Corvette is locked too.
Exactly. And that was not the case for Mr. Trump. And then apparently the Trump documents were much more sensitive, dealing with nuclear secrets, for example, dealing with secrets concerning the private life of the French president, Mr. Macron. It's unclear what the Biden documents dealt with. So we don't know if those two situations are comparable to that extent.
Absolutely. And these were documents, again, when he was vice president.
Right. Well, yeah, and there's a difference between being vice president and president, for example. So the problem is that I'm not sure if this will lead to a lessening of the pressure on Mr. Trump as a result of Mr. Biden facing the same dilemma, or alternatively, would it lead to an escalation of the pressure on Mr. Biden so that the Justice Department won't be accused of playing favorites with regard to their ultimate supervisor, who is the man in the Oval Office, Mr. Biden?
Absolutely, absolutely. Janae checked in from our online culture crew. Janae, you kicked us off this afternoon. You said at some point, people with high security clearance effed up. No one either of these administrations did their job. It's called an audit. Those people need to be fired to never work again. Right. So who's responsible for presidential for classified documents of this magnitude? Because I couldn't see the president himself or even the vice president walking around with this briefcase full of these documents. Somebody had to put them there. Am I wrong or right on that?
No, I think obviously there are staffing issues, but recall as well that Mr. Trump, when this scandal about the documents first emerged, claimed that there was no problem, there was no scandal, because he can declassify any document willy-nilly. Now, of course, there is a certain accuracy to that statement, except that there are no documents saying that he declassified these particular documents. Mr. Trump then replied that I declassified them in my head. And who knows what's in that skull of his.
I declassified them in my head. Okay, all right, look, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, folks, more conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne and you. Let's talk about what's going on in Haiti. Let's talk about the U.S.-Africa relationship and how Black Americans are at the core of the conversation as it relates to these continents and these countries working together. So we still got a lot of ground to cover. So stay with us. A lot to get to here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking to Dr. Gerald Horne, who has been giving us his analysis and insights about some of the national and international stories that we've been seeing. You know, Dr. Horne has an extensive understanding and knowledge about everything from history to foreign relations, and he is also an attorney. So he covers the gambit in terms of the wealth of information and knowledge that he has. And certainly can give us some insight and some things that we need to consider as we're looking at some of these discussions. Now, Dr. Horne, let's move from Washington. Let's go down to Haiti now, because the situation in Haiti seems to become more and more dire. This is something I know that you have been watching for some time, but it now seems like the state of Haiti is at such a point, it's in complete disarray. And what some would say is a failed state. This was reported in The Guardian when they reported that the last 10 remaining senators in Haiti's parliament have officially left office, leaving the country without a single democratically elected government official. They said that the expiration of the officials' terms at midnight on Monday formally concluded their time in office. And now Haiti, which is engulfed in gang violence and the worst malnutrition crisis in decades, now officially has no functioning parliament, as the senators were the last of 30 to remain in office after successive failed efforts to hold elections. There is no constitutional representation at any state level, the latest sign that the country has become a failed state. Is that where Haiti is right now? Is this just a lot of sensationalism?
Well, there is some accuracy to that, but I think the context is that Haiti executed a revolution over 200 years ago that was a successful revolution of enslaved Africans and has had to pay a heavy price since then, not least about 200 odd years ago when France, the colonizing power, forced Haiti to pay reparations to slave owners. That is to say, rather than the enslaved receiving reparations, the enslavers received reparations. And then on top of everything else, Haiti has been subjected to a number of important and yet misguided interventions, not least from the United States of America. During Mr. Biden's summit in Mexico City, Mr. Biden and President of Mexico, AMLO, Lopez Obrador, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talked about another ill-advised intervention. I would suggest that the United Nations engage in urgent consultations with Haiti's neighbors, particularly Cuba and Jamaica, with regard to resolving this ongoing crisis in Haiti. Part of the problem is that these two important neighbors, the closest neighbors of Haiti, have been excluded, while Canada and the United States, who both have inglorious histories in Haiti, have been at the point. That situation needs to change if Haiti is to resolve its problems.
So what does that look like for, Haiti is in a unique position because of not just, you mentioned the history there, of course, but, kind of moving forward. And I know that in these talks, especially with the president saying that he wants to try to, quote unquote, restore the relationship with Africa and in other parts of the world that have been marginalized by past U.S. administrations, where does Haiti fall into this? It seems like either Cuba or Haiti are always kind of left out there by themselves on an island of their own, no pun intended. But it just seems like, when we're talking about some of these other areas, is Haiti, will this leave Haiti up for grabs for more colonialism, more imperialism, or will this kind of shift Haiti to the point where we're saying, we're going to, continue to affirm our independence? Where does that leave the country?
Well, it was very important and indeed profound that you grouped Haiti and Cuba together. These two southern neighbors of the United States both executed world historic revolutions. Haiti's culminating in 1804 with, as noted, a successful revolt of enslaved African property. Cuba in 1959, with the ultimate result being the establishment of a socialist regime 90 miles from Florida. Both governments, both regimes have been punished steadily, even though Cuba continues to be pulverized by a U.S. blockade. It's in much better shape than Haiti. In fact, a good deal of the foreign aid in Haiti, particularly medical aid, its infrastructure in terms of health, mostly is a result of Cuban exporting of doctors and nurses to Haiti. And so, once again, I urge and insist that the United Nations, when they seek to resolve the crisis in Haiti, engage in consultations with Haiti's closest neighbor, which is Cuba, not to mention its other close neighbor, which is Jamaica.
So, I read, and this was maybe about a few weeks ago, Doc, that the United States was planning to intervene to deal with this gang wars and some of the upheaval. Now we're talking about this malnutrition of crisis. So now you're talking about a situation of hunger as well. First and foremost, as far as what is the plan for the United States? How will they engage Haiti at this point?
Well, apparently this idea of sending U.S. troops into Haiti is on the fast track. And I would urge and encourage Mr. Biden to rethink that particular proposition. The United States has intervened repeatedly in Haiti over recent decades, it has not gone very well either for the Haitians or for the U.S. soldiers. And so that is not the way to go. One would think that Mr. Biden has enough problems without adding this one to his growing list.
Absolutely. 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 And that's the last thing that we need is Haiti to feel like America is coming in to be imposed upon. Folks, look, we're going to take another quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue the conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne for the Horne Report. So stick around. We got a lot to talk about here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. As we've been talking to Dr. Gerald Horne for this week's Horne Report, talking about a number of issues. And we just got a little bit of Dr. Horne's analysis around the situation in Haiti, where they're now facing gang wars and malnutrition crisis. And also that a lot of their elected officials have left office, leaving the country in a state of political upheaval and uncertainty. Dr. Horne, again, we thank you so much for your time on this. I read this piece about Burkina Faso and their pushback against France's neo-colonialism agenda. And I'm wondering, is Haiti also going to be pushing back in some ways? Like, are we starting to see something here? I mean, I know that there's this talk of gang wars, but this is America. We're getting propaganda from this side of the conversation. And I'm wondering, is it really gang wars, or is there a certain level of resistance, a resistance movement that's happening in Haiti right now?
I would say it's all of the above. I mean, certainly there's a resistance movement, particularly there's staunch and stern resistance to the idea that U.S. forces may be arriving on Haiti's shores once again, a repetition of an unfortunate chapter in Haiti's history. On the other hand, with the disillusion virtually of the government, with senators leaving office, that has opened the door for the resurgence of what are popularly referred to as gangs, who then engage in a kind of warfare. Now, I think you have to distinguish that from what's happening in formerly Francophone Africa, speaking of Burkina Faso, Mali, etc., where governments are constituted seriously and organizationally, yet they do not approve of France's role in their particular country, which has then led to them ousting France, which is not a day too soon. And so to that extent, Haiti has to be distinguished analytically from what's happening in Burkina Faso and Mali, to name two particular West African countries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Doc, we got a couple of moments left, and I want to get your take on this. As we're looking at Haiti, we got to look at it in other places where our people are, which is the continent of Africa. And I'm really looking forward to getting your take on, how does this situation between U.S. Africa, the U.S. Africa summit that we saw taking place in Washington back in December, how is that going to play out? I came across that article where it said that Black America, African Americans, are really at the core of this conversation between the continent and the country. Now, first and foremost, explain to me, Doc, how can U.S. have a conversation with a whole continent? It just say I'm just not understanding. You bring at least 50 African leaders to the table, and you're one country on the other side of the table. And then you're kind of setting the tone, you're setting the agenda from a one country perspective. How is that possible? And why did the African leaders respond to that and say, well, wait a minute, hold up. What about this country? What about that country? What about this? This is a very interesting situation that I'm seeing here. And it really shows the level of hubris that the United States has when it comes to its foreign relations.
Well, you can't understand this U.S.-Africa summit of December 2022 without understanding the current hysteria in Washington about the role of China in Africa, the role of Russia in Africa, the role of Turkey and India in Africa. And the United States is playing catch-up ball. That is to say, the United States' reputation in Africa is not ideal, not least because the United States was a major beneficiary of the unlamented African slave trade, which deposited many of our ancestors on these shores to labor for centuries for free, not to mention the fact that during the bad old days of apartheid South Africa pre-1994, its major ally was in Washington, D.C. And so the United States is trying to play catch-up ball, but it hasn't learned the lesson, because even though there is some accuracy to the assertion that Black Americans are at the core of this renewed U.S. relationship with Africa, Black Americans need to be very careful, because there's a lot of consternation in Africa about a bill introduced by Congressional Black Caucus member Gregory Meeks of Southeast Queens, New York, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which seeks to punish and stigmatize African nations who refuse to go along with U.S. policy vis-a-vis the Ukraine. And right now, we're talking about the continent's giant, that is to say, South Africa, which has spoken in no uncertain terms that it does not agree with U.S. policy in Ukraine. And when you have a Congressional Black Caucus member carrying such legislation with the apparent support of all 46 plus CBC members, that is not a good look, I'm afraid to say, and it really compromises Black Americans' position in the motherland.
What should be the Black Americans' role at this point? Should there, and it's interesting because, I'm on these social media sites, Doc, and I'm seeing certain individual people that I've known that have done the work of trying to build the relationship, build commerce and other trade and business opportunities with folks in the continent. And it is interesting. It's like, but is that the place? Is that the role that we need to take right now? Should we be advocating for Black America to? And I know this is something that you talked about before, building that relationship now, considering that this high level talk is happening. Like, how do we fit into all of that?
We should try to build a political relationship, because I think that African nations could be very important in assisting our struggle on these shores. Okay. What I mean is that our organizations, particularly the NAACP, should probably have a representation in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where is housed the headquarters of the African Union, the transcontinental Pan-African body that represents all 46 plus African nations. In the past, you've seen Black Americans pressure the United States and pressure apartheid South Africa. Now we need the African Union to pressure the United States with regard to police killings, for example. There have been a number of human rights investigations of police killings in the United States. I'm sure you know that the family of Michael Brown, the slain teenager in Ferguson, Missouri, his family has been traveling on a regular basis to Geneva, Switzerland, where is housed the United Nations Human Rights Council. We need that kind of activity to increase, but I dare say that it will be difficult for that kind of activity to increase as long as you have the Congressional Black Caucus threatening to join in an effort to punish African countries that do not go along with U.S. policy vis-a-vis the Ukraine. After all, if sovereignty means anything, it means that the foreign policy of African nations should be determined and decided in Africa, not in Washington, D.C.
Do you foresee Democratic House Speaker Hakeem Jeffries playing a role in this whole process, considering that his family ties, go back to grassroots Pan-Africanism? Do you see him opening some doors, kind of cutting through some red tape for this type of relationship building to take place?
We shall see, but Hakeem Jeffries is under tremendous pressure. That is to say, he may be the incoming speaker in 2024, 2025. The Democrats are able to flip the House. Recall the kind of pressure that Barack Obama was under when he was president between 2008 and 2016, including a record number of attempted assassinations. I hope and I trust that Mr. Obama will deal with that in the second volume of his memoirs, which are slated to be published any day, week, or month now. And so I'm basically rather hesitant to suggest that Hakeem Jeffries could play this leading role that I've just sketched. But certainly the NAACP can. Certainly certain members of the Congressional Black Caucus, members who do not run the risk of being defeated at the polls, can play that kind of role. I'm thinking, for example, of Cori Bush of St. Louis, for example. I'm thinking of Barbara Lee of Oakland Berkeley, who, by the way, is now deciding to run for the U.S. Senate to replace Dianne Feinstein. That shows how much confidence that she has in her political and electoral role in the Golden State. So even if Hakeem Jeffries cannot play this role, there are certain members of the CBC and of mass organizations like the NAACP that can play that role.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sandy checked in and said, with a little humility is in order, as the doctor is correct. U.S. is one country. You cannot use blanket tactics in a whole continent of independent thinking African leadership. I would agree. And I think that for us, as we're talking, as you have advised us to do, Doc, Black folks in this country, we can't think that all African nations think one way. We have to think that, we have to respect each of the ideologies and the cultures of all of those countries on the continent and keep and approach them in a different way. So I'm right there with you on that one, Sandy. Tiana, you checked in and said, yeah, the future is Africa, but how do we stop countries from robbing her? I'm going to leave that question for you, Doc. How do we make sure that doesn't continue to happen?
Well, that's happening as we speak. As you probably know, there's an African Continental Free Trade Area, a common market, not unlike the European Union, which is a common market of 450 Europeans. We're talking about 1 billion plus Africans. That is a gigantic step forward in terms of Africa being able to protect its resources. And I should also say, as we talked about on the culture many times previously in late 2022, given the fact that the United States and its allies are seeking to boycott Russia, Russian energy, for example, Russian natural gas, Russian petroleum, that puts a premium on Nigerian petroleum, Angolan petroleum, Algerian natural gas. And so to a certain extent, Africa is moving towards sitting in the catbird seat. And Absolutely. That is one of the reasons why you had this spectacle of Mr. Biden meeting with almost 50 heads of state and heads of government from the African continent in December 2022.
Absolutely. One more thing, Dr. Horn, before we let you go, and I truly, truly appreciate your time, and God willing, we'll reconnect with you next week. But I do want to get your take. You brought up Ukraine and Russia. You know, President Zelensky did make his trip over here just a few weeks ago to speak to members of Congress. They praised the Ukrainian president for his courage and for, you know, the great words, and they likened him to various members in history. What do you make of that situation? Was that just grandstanding? Because America continues to put billions, I'm saying with the B, billions of dollars behind this effort of Ukraine and Russia, billions of dollars, many military equipment, a lot of amounts of military equipment. So what we saw with Zelensky coming over, making that speech, shoring up the support of the United States, how should the American people take a look at that? Particularly, how should Black America look at that?
Well, I think Black America should be quite concerned that at a time when homelessness is spiraling in Black Los Angeles, as you know more than most, since you're sited in the Golden State, in the southern part of the Golden State, and given the fact that hunger continues to stalk the land, it's virtually obscene that billions in our tax dollars are going down a rat hole in Ukraine. Because despite all of the propaganda that we are fed on a daily basis, the battle of the Ukrainians is not going very well right now. In fact, it would not surprise me that if before the end of the year, you see the white flag of surrender be floated and unfurled in Kiev, Ukraine. And yet the United States continues to send weaponry there, continues to send tax dollars there. Although, to be fair, I should say that there's sort of a boomerang effect. That is to say, the United States sends tax dollars to Kiev, Ukraine, then the money comes right back to the United States to Lockheed and Raytheon, who then send weapons to Ukraine and then profit handsomely in the form of these executives who then are able to purchase McMansions in Falls Church, Virginia, and Chevy Chase, Maryland. It's really a scandal that needs to end sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. Dr. Gerald Horn, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to connect with you. God willing, we'll reconnect with you next week, because I got to pick your brain, sir, about this immigration situation that we see with the president. I'm giving it some time to see how it continues to unravel and develop. But I truly appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to having our conversations with you again here on the Horn Report. So thankfully, we'll be able to do that again next week.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation. Stay with us. A lot coming at you here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Just had a fantastic conversation with my big brother and scholar, researcher, writer, author, professor, Dr. Gerald Horn. And I really want to get your take on this, folks, because we talked about a plethora of topics and issues. But it seems like there are so many big things happening on the horizon, on the outside of the United States. And so I wanted to just take a couple of moments to check in with you to see what your thoughts are about some of those topics that we were talking about. And you know, I am very excited, but at the same time, greatly concerned about where we are on an international level. As I'm learning more and more about international affairs and politics, it's eye-opening to see the changes and the fact that there is no permanent, you know, they say that there are no permanent friends, no permanent interest, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And so as I'm looking at how things are moving across the globe, I'm seeing that more and more and more. So I want to give you an opportunity to check in and just be to share your thoughts as we've had our conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne, our first of many conversations, God willing, that we'll be having with the good professor over the next few months as he's doing the great work that he's doing. And so I want to just highlight just a couple of what a lot of you are saying around this situation and with various issues. Here, let me take a look at Conscious Thought. Conscious Thought, you put a post and you said, how do we stop countries? And that's the question. How do we stop countries from robbing Africa? At Tiana, yeah, the future is Africa, but how do we stop countries from robbing her? And I think that is probably one of the most significant questions that we have to ask ourselves, particularly here in this part of the world, looking at how things are happening. I don't know about you folks, and Conscious Thought, I'm sure, brother, you probably been thinking about this. And, you know, we had my friend, my brother, Sinead Wakwafor on the show a couple of weeks ago to talk about his his take on what he saw with the whole U.S. African summit. Excuse me. And one of the things he said was he doesn't believe that it's helpful, that he really believes that it's a harmful situation. The effort is not the way that the U.S. presented the situation and bringing these, nearly 50 African leaders together is a lot of just, pomp and circumstance, and that it really doesn't get to the crux of what's going on the continent. So I'm just interested. It's going to be very, very interesting, to say the least, Conscious Thought, how we're going to stop this. And now that we're seeing this crisis that's rising up in Haiti, I brought up Burkina Faso. These are serious crises. Burkina Faso, I was reading earlier today before the show, how they are resisting France right now. They have told French leaders, French officials, to get out the country. So we're in a very, very, I think, critical time with our relationship with Africa. And I think that for all of us, we should keep our eyes on the continent, on the motherland, to make sure that we're doing our part. Doc, so Conscious Thought, I appreciate you for bringing that, kind of reiterating what Tiana had put on the table as well. Damon, my brother, excuse me, must be something in the air. But Damon, you checked in and said, I love hearing Dr. Horne and his brilliance. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So, folks, I truly enjoy bringing Dr. Horne on to having these conversations. Look, I want to take a quick pause. I'm going to get a little something to drink. When we come back, let's continue the conversation. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show where this is just the opportunity I wanted to check in with my online culture crew, you, to get your take on all that we've been talking about as we talked to Dr. Gerald Horne. We had him on for a good hour and just wanted to pick your brain to get your take on all that you heard from Dr. Horne as it relates to Africa-U.S. relations, to our Biden document dilemma, to all the things that we just talked about. And so, wanted to give you a chance and an opportunity to post your comments, and we'll try to get to as many comments. In a few minutes, we're going to just have a different conversation with a culture crew member. So stick around for that as well. But I wanted to highlight something that Janelle, you checked in and said, which I think is absolutely important. You said the president of Ghana made comments that spoke to people globally as if he definitely wanted to showcase his hope to unify the descendants of Africa, regardless of where they live today. I think that is going to be the trend. I think that's going to be the trend. And Janelle, I always appreciate you, sis, for bringing certain things to the table. But I think that's going to be the trend. I think that for us in this country, in this part of the world, we should be really looking, keeping our eyes open, and seeing what are ways that we can build those relationships. Dr. Horne has been advocating this since he's been on the show, and I think that is something that we need to continue to really consider, and most importantly, try to figure out how we can move out on. And I'm talking about en masse. I know there are a number of Black folks, man, who travel to the continent, who've had these transformative experiences, whether they travel to Egypt or Ghana or South Africa, wherever they go to on the continent. and they come back renewed, they come back recommitted, they come back with a broader sense of self and a deeper sense of history. We know Brother Roland has made those trips in as well. So, but that is an experience that Black America needs to have. And I think that is something that, and I'm happy to hear, Janelle, that the president of Ghana is speaking more universally about how we can bridge the gap between the descendants. Sandy, Janelle, thank you so much. Sandy, you said Africa's resources are still in large quantity, etc. Oil, diamonds, ore, labor is all in Africa. Can get all of that in one continent anywhere else. Can you get all of that in one continent? No. Now, America certainly has its resources, right? And that's why it's important for us to even have this relationship. And more importantly, this is why I even brought up the fact that you have one country calling nearly 50 other country heads to the table. Just think about that, folks. I mean, just thinking about it from a mathematical standpoint, thinking about it, like one country is calling a whole continent to the table, and it just shows where we are. If America is serious about building a relationship between us and the motherland, then there would certainly be more respect to all of those countries and to the culture and to the people of each one of those countries, because they all got diverse interests. And if they have diverse interests, America can't be the supplier or can't be the fulfiller of all of these interests. So it is interesting. And you got all of these resources in the continent. At this point, it's really about, okay, how do we make sure that these resources are preserved and protected? But let me just say this. We know that history is our best teacher. Should African leaders trust America, considering the history that this country has had with African leadership, with the land of Africa? So there's still a lot for us to consider. And more importantly, I think this is an opportunity for more Black folks to be at the tables, to be a part of those conversations on a national and international level. Let me go back to what you were saying, folks. Yes, Damon, you said the 1619 Project documentary that Roland has is awesome. I watched it back in August. Absolutely. Very, very powerful documentary that Brother Roland put out about his trip to seeing how our people were a part of the transatlantic slave trade and that whole process. Absolutely. Absolutely. CW, you checked in and you said all of Africa is poor. They need to help one another. Facts. And I think they're trying to. Tiana, I think that you brought it up early in the conversation where you mentioned Gaddafi. And that's something I always kind of bring into the discussion, that Gaddafi was not an enemy to Black folks in Africa. He was an ally. He's a Black man. So he understands the dynamics of things and the dynamics of power. So no. I mean, to that point, CW, yes, they need to help themselves. But Africa need to help themselves. But we also know that Africa is hugely dependent upon these other countries, and like Russia and Ukraine and the United States and France, and they depended upon Europe and all of these things. I mean, because unfortunately, CW, and I'm sure you know this, Africa has been chopped up by colonialists, by imperialists for international domination. And so it is hard to talk about unifying Africa without also discussing those who are, quote unquote, the current, I don't want to say colonizers of Africa, right? You can't talk about bringing these folks together, bringing these countries together, or them supporting one another, or them helping one another, if you're not going to talk about that history of colonization that continues to exist to this very, very moment. Let's go back to what you see, and let me get here from what other folks are saying about this. And I think I want to jump off of Africa very quickly, and let's look at what's happening nationally. if we're looking at these next 2 years, and I want us to kind of key in on, if you haven't had a chance to hear Dr. Horn and his view of what could potentially happen over these next 2 years in this country, we may have to deal with Africa a lot sooner than later, because the winds of change, especially dealing with this whole GOP and Democrat House Speaker situation, these things are really, and I'm serious, folks, it did not dawn on me until we were literally having the conversation with Dr. Horn. It's like, wait a minute, this could be the groundwork of something where there might be a revolution in this country over the next 2 years. We might be seeing this. When you have McCarthy back in Santos, when you have GOP members saying, going to war with one another, when you have all of these different like sects and parties, and the system is breaking here, the system is breaking there, it's not crazy for us to believe that an internal civil war may be on the horizon. I don't want us to put that to the back burner. I want us to keep that in mind, put it right there on the forefront, right on the front burner, because it's cooking. The situation is absolutely cooking right now in this country for that level of resistance, that level of violence, that level of rebellion against its own government. And some of us may think to ourselves, it would never happen. There are checks and balances in place. It wouldn't get that far. But all I would say to you is January the 6th. January the 6th. If January the 6th could have happened the way it did, and if they would have gotten one political official, one elected representative, it can happen. They were close. They were close. But it can definitely happen. And it may not be from Trump this time. It could just simply be from those who are just upset, dissatisfied. So I don't want us to lose sight of that particular threat that's on the horizon. All right, excuse me. I want to take another pause. When we come back, folks, let's continue the conversation. In a few moments, I want us to have a discussion about what's going on with Gerard Carmichael. Y'all heard my take on the situation about how his performance, quote unquote, at the Golden Globes on Sunday night was coonery. Well, I'm not the only one who thought that. So stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, I want to talk about what's going on with this Golden Globe scenario. Y'all remember yesterday, and big shout out to my team, man. Big shout out to Keenan, to Ariel, Joel, my culture crew yesterday. Man, just having that conversation. And, you know, for me, folks, when I have certain discussions, especially to y'all for my online culture crew, when we have these discussions, it's important that, you know, that if we're on the right page. And I often ask myself that question, like, am I on the right page and thinking that? And when we did a poll yesterday, we said that, you know, most of you disapproved of Carmichael's performance, quote unquote. I don't even want to say performance. I would just say his style of hosting. Most of us disapproved of his style of hosting. And I disapproved of it because it was just very, very disrespectful to Black culture and Black artistry. And it's crazy because he's an artist, but he just went too far. And so, you know, I wanted to, you know, just put my thoughts out there and see how things just transpired. And if you didn't get a chance to watch yesterday's show, I want you to definitely check it out and just let me know. Y'all can shoot me an email or hit me up on my social at The Real Farajii on IG, Farajii on Twitter, and let me know if you agree or disagree with my view that what we saw from Gerard Carmichael was coonery. Now, I'm not going to get into it in the sense of what we already covered yesterday, but today it was made public that the Whitney Houston estate was had said some things, basically called out Gerard Carmichael for this situation. I don't know if Keenan and Ariel, if y'all can pull up the video, if we can find the video of the joke. Well, I'm not going to say the joke. I'm going to say the poor taste comment that Gerard Carmichael made about our sister. Well, Keenan's telling me he wouldn't recommend that. Okay, we don't have to put it up. Okay, that's fine. But it was in poor taste. It was a poor, I mean, it wasn't even a joke, folks. It was just terrible, highly distasteful, highly disrespectful. So I wanted us to talk about this because now that the Whitney Houston estate has put out an official statement around this situation, it goes back to why it is important that we have these conversations about Black entertainment, Black arts, Black culture. And so I had to bring in my sister who was on with me yesterday. You know what I'm saying? She was a little taken aback by my passion. And it's just my passion talking, you know what I'm saying? But I was very serious. I'm dead ass serious about how I feel about the situation. But I had to talk to my sister, Suzette Speaks, TV host and attorney, and say, Suzette, because we talked a little bit earlier today, and I was like, Suzette, I need you to come back on just for a few minutes to get your take on what the Whitney Houston estate has put out as their official statement in response to the poor taste of Gerard Carmichael's comments. Here's what the Whitney Houston estate put out as their statement. It's a very short statement. Take a look. The Whitney Houston estate is disappointed in the joke and felt it was in poor taste. Boom. Boom. They were disappointed that Gerard Carmichael referenced our icon in such a negative light. Now, I even went on some social media, and y'all tell me if I'm wrong on this, if I might be just jumping the gun, because I even saw a couple of folks check in on the chat yesterday who said, well, Farajii, you know, you everybody wants to be like socially active or socially conscious, or more importantly, everybody is like, you know, y'all too uptight as a comedian. I mean, shouldn't there be some boundaries on comedy though? Like for real. Like, shouldn't there be, like, I remember when the whole Tiffany Haddish, Ari Spears situation came up, right? The fact that you even made a video about that, violating children. Tiffany Haddish the thing she said was, you know, it was poor judgment that she got involved in the project. But the fact that it was even a discussion to say this is funny. There has to be some boundaries on it. Now, we've talked about this before, but how many times do we put our own culture or we put our own pain and use it as fodder for white entertainment? That's the problem that I'm having. All right, let me bring my sister in. Suzette Speaks. Y'all can check her out on YouTube. Suzette, it's good to see you again.
You too, part 2. Let's do it.
So the Whitney Houston estate has essentially said that this is poor taste. This was offensive. This was disrespectful. Now, as far as I can find, Gerard Carmichael has not put out any statement to say that he apologized for the joke, quote unquote joke, that he apologized about anything. Do you think he needs to?
Well, I think it was a powerful, so simple, but to the point that there are things that we shouldn't do, whether or not we are in this type of industry. Again, comedians have a very tough job, Farajii. The sentiment and the way people view these type of issues has changed even in the last 5 years. Things that you could joke about 10, 20 years ago, it's just not socially acceptable right now. The landscape has changed. So I think if he, maybe wants to put, something out that maybe explains, I didn't intend for this to hurt the way it or how it came across. If you're offended, that kind of thing, maybe somebody in his PR camp can put something together for him. I think it would serve him well. I don't think he may do that, though. I think he's probably of the or leaning toward, just based on how he delivered himself, this is my job and I did my job. You can like it, you can, think of this art as offensive, that's fine. So I don't think he will do it, Farajii. I just think it was, again, something that was, shocking to listen to. When I listened to it over again, I was like, whoa, yeah, it was definitely in poor taste. But I don't think he's going to, likely, unless money is on the table, money that he could be earning that unfortunately, maybe compromised because of this. Unless he has something like that happen to him, I doubt he will do it.
So let me ask you: should this be a conversation? Like, should we? And I feel like from a cultural standpoint, I know that there are always those people, Suzette, where people say, well, we got a lot of other important things to discuss in the world. Like, of course, there's always important things to discuss in the world. But this show is called The Culture. So we're talking about, I hate where people act as if the culture, our culture, whether it's Black entertainment, Black arts, whether it's like as if it's not important, because you know what? Headlines don't shape people as much as culture does.
Absolutely. And Black people shape the
like
culture.
How we engage. And this is why we even have this platform and created the show, because culture has more influence on a person's behavior and how they see themselves, their thinking, their understanding of their identity. Culture plays a huge part of that. So to have a Black man in front of a mostly white audience on a nationally televised scenario, talking just whoop, 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 all types of stuff. And then some people say, well, he didn't really insult Whitney Houston. He insulted the hotel. The hotel has no feelings. The Beverly Hills Hilton has no feelings. It is an inanimate object.
Yeah.
When you reference our sister that says the hotel killed, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it was just really a kind of a low bar to set. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about how much influence we as Black people have on not only American culture, but internationally. The influences seen around the world in terms of our music, our fashion, our food. I think about our responsibility just to understand that anything that we say is okay, other people will think is okay. So I think it's probably the conversation, yes, should be had, because what if we do condone this type of, so-called humor? It makes it okay for others to step into the arena and say, well, he does it or they do it. And I think sometimes we have to be much more conscientious of that fact, that even though it was, for the people in the room, this was broadcast globally. And what it's saying about how we, diminish ourselves, diminish our own lives, diminish our icons, by making kind of very, edgy and inappropriate, some would say, jokes about them. It's just we have to create a boundary. I know we're in a kind of anything goes, era in our society where people want to just say almost anything and get away with it. But I still think it's appropriate to say, wait a minute, this is a boundary you probably shouldn't cross, and we don't find it socially acceptable for the culture. So I think it's something that we obviously really should be talking about.
All right, so I'm looking at Twitter right now as we speak, right? Because I'm just interested to get a gauge of where people are. I'm looking at one Twitter user. She puts out there, she posted this yesterday. She said, when you mesh, MESH, excuse me, when you mesh 0 Fs and living in your truth, you get Gerard, make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, there was another side to this. Some people were applauding him. I saw, an article, I think it was in the Griot and some other places, that kind of applauded him for his, uncouth approach to this stage and to the great platform and responsibility, as we see it, that he was given. There are people that are really, enjoyed him. Others that argue that, y'all taking this thing too seriously. And I watched the opening monologue, and I thought that was really interesting how he kind of laid out why he was there in the first place. I thought he was trying to, use that to explain, why some platforms, although in his opinion may be controversial, we as Black folks, we need our money, we need our bag. And so he approached it as, I'm gonna get this bag and do a job, notwithstanding. So I think also that influences culture going forward when people are kind of faced with this. And I think we talked about that Wednesday. Do you make a stand here? Do you take a stand and say, no, go find someone else, like we did for a little bit with the NFL? Another, gave up the bag as a part of, solidarity to a cause bigger than us. And that was super important to us as a community. I do think he probably, and some who support him, or support his performance, think that, why are we so up in arms? He was paid to be a comedian. You may not like his jokes. It is satire. It's in your face. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. But specifically as it pertains to Whitney Houston, I just feel like, maybe you can run that by somebody next time. Maybe you should have taken that meeting with the top person of the Hollywood Foreign Press. And, I don't know if his team kind of thinking anything went wrong. I think for them, he's had PR for a few days now, a couple days. So I don't know, maybe they won. We're still talking about him. So it's sad to say, but in this kind of social media soundbite society, maybe he was successfully executing what he wanted. And thus here we are. Farajii, I think you're muted.
Okay, there we go. Speaking of that, I'm looking at a Twitter user by the name of Minda Hart. She said, for those who know Gerard Carmichael comedy, you would know that he understood his assignment and he did it his way. He brought his authentic self to work, and that is a form of freedom, no longer being confined. You might want to try on freedom one day. Then she put the gift of I said what I said.
No, there were supporters out there, so I don't know.
This is why I think that this conversation, it merits some time and has carried some weight, because now it's getting meshed with no longer being disrespectful to now, well, I'm being who I am, my authentic self. And
don't judge me.
Right, don't judge me, don't censor me. Let me just say what the hell I want to say. And if you get offended by it, that's a you problem.
Yeah, no.
Right? And part of me is thinking, okay, I get the fact that you want to bring your authentic self to any space because that's important. But we don't live around ourselves.
No.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because if we open this authentic self door, and then white people or other people start to bring their authentic selves, Are we going to be like, well, that's their freedom, that's their way?
Exactly. Yeah, no, we are as a culture faced with that dilemma, not only with this particular situation, but I think as a whole with how people are utilizing their sexuality, how people are expressing themselves through gender, how people are expressing themselves in a multitude of ways, where I think there are two, very strong beliefs, which is one, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and justify it by saying you're being yourself. And then there's another school of thought within our community that is just very, very tied to time and place appropriateness, and using a boundary of appropriateness where you cannot just fly off the handle and then later justify it with, I've just been myself, you're welcome. So I think, especially when you talk about work, this was a job he was hired to do. I think there are still going to be boundaries when you go to work, when you go to other places. You can't just do anything you want. So in that kind of, what should I say, dilemma, we are still as a culture kind of unsettled with which way we want to go. You have individuals that really and truly are holding fast to love it or leave it. I'm gonna say what I mean and mean what I say. I'm gonna wear what I want to wear. I'm gonna be as vulgar, or maybe some people would just call it sexually expressive. Again, which hat do you have on? But with our language, with our dress, with our clothing, again, we could talk about the bonnets and we could talk about other things that the culture has kind of had this kind of duality on. When is it appropriate to do certain things? Is there still an appropriate time and place? And I do believe there is. And I think as a culture, we have to push back and kind of redefine those boundaries, or we'll kind of devolve into a very, wild, wild west if anything goes.
And that's the place that, and I'm certainly happy that you mentioned that, because that's exactly the place that I think that we'll find ourselves in, Suzette. Lana, you checked in. You break a great point, Lana, and I want to highlight it. You said, I had a mentor, and he used to say, think about how what you do not only impacts your race, or not only impact you, but your race. Mm-hmm. Don't embarrass the race. I can see this guy being said N-word by friends, and he laughs. Exactly. Clown.
Well,
see, here's this. That's the part of it. And Lana, I'm so grateful that you brought this up, because your mentor is right. And I think that to some degree, and I know some people might say this might be a stretch for Farajii, but let me just hear me out. I think to some degree, when we are talking about, when we speak outside of what's in the best interest of our race, that's a certain level of self-hatred. When you diminish, when you make fun of the pain of your own people, that's a level of self-hate. That's a form of self-hatred. When you start to believe that you are not connected to the people, to the community that you are a part of, the physical and the cultural community that you're a part of, that's a form of self-hatred to me. Now, I could be completely wrong.
I think there's a spectrum to that. Yeah,
you bashing, it's like the conversation that we often have. I'm sure you've been a part of these discussions in the sense of, Suzette, how black men talk bad about black women and black women talk bad about black men. At the end of the day, all of that is coming from a place of deep pain, deep hatred for the other person, right? At the end of the day, there's something there. And that's what I'm seeing. Like, you can't dress that up. You can't dress, well, no. See, as black folk, we've been under enough pain, enough struggle, enough issues under white supremacy, racism, oppression, and tyranny, and all of those things, that it is possible that you can wind up hating yourself, and you can disguise it as, oh, I'm just making a joke.
Farajii, that's deep. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about how, like, on a spectrum that might be, because there are definitely people who have the self-awareness and situational awareness to know that's what they're doing. And then there's members of our community who don't have the self-awareness and situational awareness that they're doing that. And it can be very subconscious. So I do think some people may unfortunately lack that awareness within themselves to know what the root of this type of kind of self-deprecation comes from. I think some people, I don't know, harbor feelings, again, maybe not for the race, but for themselves, within themselves, a lack of self-love and self-confidence and just general insecurity. And then there are others of us, again, the grooming, the socialization, and Sinead would be the better person to talk about, you know, the psychological trauma that's passed down and developed within a society that makes you feel second class or that otherizes you through racist, which I say systems in and around your life. So I do think some of it is conscious, is what you're talking about, and I think some of it is subconscious as well. But it's up to us to really try to, you know, call it out and say, where did this come from? And as a community, does this uplift and build and set the type of example we want? Or is this an example of something that we really must shun going forward?
It certainly is. It certainly is. And I'm more concerned more than anything about the impact that it has. And again, I think this puts Black folks, and I'm saying particularly, especially, specifically Black folks in this conundrum that this is okay. When in fact, it's not okay. Now, I'm not the great lord of the culture. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of Black culture, I'm just saying very bluntly, it's not okay to make fun of your own pain the way that he made fun of the sister of our system. You know what I mean? Reference her in that way. It's not okay in some of the other things that he has said in the past. It's just not okay. And you can't put that as a cloak like, oh man, that's just comedy. What comedy is what we saw Dave Chappelle do on SNL.
This, opening skit, the recent appearance he made,
The last appearance that he did on SNL, where he talked about anti-Semitism, talking about the Jewish-Black relationships. That's a certain level. But see, in order to get to that place, you have to become more self-aware. You have to see yourself as part of, as I mentioned yesterday, the link in the chain. But you have to have some self-consciousness before you can even get to that place. And look, I think that it's only right that we check people who do disrespect the culture, man. Because, you know, that whole authentic self bullshit, that is bull. Like, man, I don't want to hear that. Talking about he for the bag and all that. But your Black ass still showed up, right? You thinking you going against the man. If you would have, now, it would have been a more powerful conversation if you would have said, they offered me $500,000 and I told them no, because I ain't like how they treated Black folks and their diversity issues. Boom, 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 boom. Then for us, we would have been like, whoa, then that's principle. Now that man is a man of principle, right? They offered me $500,000 and I turned it down because I didn't want to associate myself. Now, if he would have came out and said that, but because you threw the money thing situation in there, it's just, it adds something to it. We got to take a quick pause. Suzette, when we come back, I want to get some comments from our online culture crew. So folks, stay with us as we continue to talk about Gerard Carmichael, the Whitney Houston estate, and so much more here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, we've been checking in and talking to my sister, Suzette Speaks, TV host and attorney, as we are continuing our conversation about Gerard Carmichael, the host of the 80th Global Awards. There he is. This one of many moments that he had when he was holding the 3 Golden Globe Awards from Tom Cruise, and he made a joke about Tom Cruise, Scientology, and Shelley Mikovich, the disappearance of Shelley Mikovich. And to say that his opening monologue and his comedy was edgy is saying it lightly. He crossed so many bounds for a lot of people that some people say that this is classic Gerard Carmichael comedy. I want to bring my sister Suzette Speaks back into the frame here. Classic. He said that that's what he does. He's a satirical comedian. But
I'm not sure. The thing is, I wanted to add, Farajii, real quick before we go to the audience, is that sometimes, and again, calling out is a good thing, but sometimes we also need to educate, because there may be a part of him that doesn't simply understand the true impact of what he did or what he tried to express and how it was received. So I think sometimes self-awareness is something that we might presume everyone has, and how, we move as a racial group in terms of those politics might not be something that he is ultimately as, keen on. So I think it might be an educational moment as well.
I mean, it has to be a big educational moment. Big educational moment. CW asks, can he be sued? Can he be sued for saying anything? I mean, so. You are an attorney, so we're going to have to ask.
Well, I don't, again, because it's in the line of comedy, I doubt it. And it was, it's
not like libel.
You expect to be offended by. So I don't know about libel. I don't know about libel in that case, but maybe another attorney would differ. I just doubt it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, CW. Janae, you say he'll be educated when he is not invited back.
See, y'all. I mean, healthy discourse. He really may not be as astute as we think he is in those kind of conversations about, group politics, group, movement and progression when it comes to advancement of all colored people. I don't think he might see himself in that fight or in that way, but it's okay. But it does still have an impact. So maybe we do need to kind of bring him back into the fold and ask him questions and try to educate him on why he did what he did and took the approach he took. But I still don't think it justifies it, but I do think it might be a teachable moment.
BB, you checked in and said it was about the money with us until we get our foot stuck in some kind of doo-doo.
Well,
absolutely. Karen, my sister Karen Connor, you checked in and said, Farajii Muhammad, you are the king of the culture, and you are 100% correct. Carefully studying the faces of the Black and other races in the audience, people were annoyed. His impact was negative.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a moment of unity, honestly, because there were, again, so many of our wonderful, outstanding artists in the audience and those who were actually being awarded that we didn't need to take away from them. Again, we're not talking about, some platforms have talked about Angela Bassett and other wins, Quinta Brunson and others, but we're still talking about him. So I think sometimes, your job as a host, Farajii, I don't know if you would agree. Again, the show is not about me. The show is about, introducing the people, the ideas, and, the intent must be to elevate those from who you are, charged with, bringing a light to. And I think maybe even as a host, I think he might have missed the mark.
Here's the thing. And even in a situation like that, okay, so even as a host, you're walking into a very tense-filled situation, right? Because it's been 2 years since the Golden Globes, diversity, racism talk, and all of that stuff. So if I was given the opportunity, I would walk in there and having some very real conversation. And maybe that's just me because my
style, right?
You know what I'm saying? My style of hosting is okay, I'm walking to the room. I'm talking to people who shape the culture.
Yeah.
Filmmakers, actors, actresses, artists, producers, directors. These are the people that shape the culture. They tell us what's trending. They tell us what's hot, what's not hot, who's high, who's low. I mean, these are the people that are in the room, right? So what do you do when you have all of that affixed on you? You use that as a way to get certain things across. You know what I mean? There is so much that you can do with that to bring about the type of change that the culture is wants to see. And it's you can use that moment, like you said, to educate some people. You could talk about the fact that yes, they haven't had anybody Black on their board since then George Floyd situation popped up, the killing of George Floyd, and then that happened. We got to do better. The industry needs to do better. Get more people. There's an old saying that you can attract more people with honey than you can with vinegar, right?
True. Yeah.
So you get people to decide, because guess what? When it comes to, and this might be me, but I've seen when it comes to race issues, Black men aren't the ones that the world go to talk about race issues.
No.
We hear from Black women.
Yeah.
Right? But when you have intelligence speaking about racism coming from a Black man,
yeah,
in white spaces,
yeah,
that carries a whole different level of significance. And it's not, you don't have to be, shucking and jiving, but you can get your point across, because as soon as you walk in the room, they know for sure, oh boy, this one got some substance. He ain't coming here to play. And look at how much, I bet you, the same way we talk about Gerard Carmichael in this light, imagine if there was a Black man who stood up there to present the issue of diversity and racism and the lack of evolution in Hollywood. If he would have did it in a much more
sophisticated,
sophisticated, it don't have to be scholarly,
but
a much more intelligent way.
Yeah.
then guess
I mean,
what?
I'm thinking about a Chris Rock. I'm thinking about a Dave Chappelle. I'm thinking about
you can think about it, and then it could be. Imagine if it was like I don't know, any black male actor, any black male artist, right? Who comes up there? You got your suit and tie. The presentation is on point. You look like a king. You sound like a king, and you're talking about race issues in a room with people who understand culture.
Listen, the moment was something that I think could have been, terrific as you described, Farajii, because I don't like to compare and contrast because, again, I think it puts us in a conundrum as a community because anytime a black man gets this type of opportunity, our instinct is to want to cheer him, right? And to support him. We want him to do, his best and, again, represent for the culture. But when we're in a situation where we see that, unfortunately, it has kind of fallen flat, it makes it very difficult. And I think sometimes we can be uncomfortable with critiquing what we know isn't as strong of a representation that we kind of could have had as you've described. But I do think, it comes with time. It comes with practice. I know, again, not everyone is a Dave Chappelle. Not everyone is a Chris Rock. And they probably got 30 years, 20 years or so in the business on him,
right?
That kind of thing. And they've lived longer. They understand, again, the dynamics of what it means to have a mic in your hand as a black man with, this type of access to a platform that influences, like you said, the influencers, the people who have the world believing, stereotypes or whatever about us and others. They really are the architects of all aspects of culture. So I agree with you that this could have been an excellent moment for him to use in that way, so that it could, yield some more benefits for us as a whole. But I think the approach was wrong. The approach was more of a kind of individualistic. And again, sticking to his style, this is what he knows. So again, maybe we were asking a lot of somebody who didn't even have that intention to begin with.
Or that consciousness.
Yeah, could be.
Or that consciousness. The least he can do is apologize to the Whitney Houston estate. For real, the least he could do is apologize and say, look, I meant no harm or disrespect to the life and legacy of Whitney Houston. Something. The least
it would be nice, but I doubt it. I don't know.
I doubt it too.
Just it might, seeing what I saw, I'm like, hey, I don't think he might.
It's not going to happen.
But he might. We don't know. He may.
Well, it's not going to happen.
Get a brother benefit of the doubt, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe not. Suzette Speaks checking in as always. Truly appreciate you for coming back on and talking about this.
Of course.
Host and attorney. Make sure y'all check her out for her YouTube show, Suzette Speaks. You can find her on YouTube. And we truly appreciate her. She's always looking for some new subscribers. So definitely subscribe to her show there. Suzette, thank you so much for being on The Culture again.
Always a pleasure. Call me up anytime. Thank you. Glad to be back.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you. I want to thank our other very special guest, Dr. Gerald Horne, who, God willing, will be back with us next week for another installment of the Horne Report. All right, make sure y'all do your part in supporting us here. We're having these conversations because why? It's important and it's necessary. Make sure y'all go to Black Star Network and do your part to support us on here as we're doing this great work of Black media, unlike any other space, any other place that you find on social media or on television or on radio. So make sure you go to Black Star Network and support us financially and in other ways today. That's going to do it for me. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to spend with you. Stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.